Despite all the technological advances and the financial case for heat pumps, misconceptions about what it's like to live with a heat pump just haven't gone away. We've already touched on some of these topics, but let's talk in detail through some of the familiar complaints about heat pumps and separate fact from fiction. So, first, Sean, I've heard heat pumps blow cold air.
Many folks are familiar with furnaces or old boiler systems, and they may be expecting a heat pump to have those same hot temperatures that you get from those fossil-fueled systems. And in fact, those systems do have a hotter temperature. Furnaces often put out air at the supplies around 130 degrees. The temperature out of a supply from a heat pump is going to be lower, but still quite warm. It'll be around 100 degrees. So that may lead them to believe that because it's a lower air temperature, it's not going to keep their home warm. It's important to let them know that that cooler air temperature is a normal operating condition, and it's something that they should expect. But it will still keep their house warm.
I mean, and sort of related, people say, even if they don't say they blew cold air, people are saying, oh, well, so-and-so had a heat pump and they're just not comfortable. Is that true?
Consistency of heat is one of the drivers of comfort, and fully variable heat pumps provide a much better experience in this. Furnaces and boilers, as well as single or even two-stage heat pumps, cut on and off routinely. Variable speed heat pumps that run for longer cycles at lower speeds are going to be quieter and have fewer disruptive starts and stops. They'll provide the most even heat and provide it at a slower fan speed. This is the best comfort, and it's also a quieter system because of this. Additionally, it increases the system life. It's all those starts and stops that are really hard on HVAC equipment. So by having the system run more continually and longer, you reduce that number of start and stops, and therefore the wear and tear in the HVAC equipment. One of the other things that can affect comfort is where the supply vents are located. Sometimes those are the real problem. Supplies ideally should be positioned so they're not blowing air directly on the people living in the space. They should just be keeping the room comfortable without the occupants even knowing if it's running or not, because they're not feeling that breeze. So if new ducts are being installed, the supply placement should definitely be considered as part of that installation, and they should be placed so they're not throwing air on the people in the room. If there are supplies already in place, you can get different grills that will direct the air in different directions, again with the goal of keeping it from being blown on the occupants in the space. Finally, with the DC motor heat pumps, the inverter ones, that blower fan is always going to be running at the lowest speed possible. That minimizes the negative effects of high airspeed while keeping those unevenly insulated and the rooms with different sun exposures closest to the thermostat setting more of the time.
I've also heard that if you have an older house and you want to switch to a heat pump, that you're going to always have to have wiring upgrades. Do you think that's true?
In some cases it will be true, but there's many cases where it won't be true. There will be some houses where that's necessary, but there will also be a lot of houses where you can use the existing panel. In the panel that you see on the slide here, that house switched from an oil boiler that was providing heat and domestic hot water to an inverter cold climate heat pump and an electric water heater. And they were able to do that without any panel upgrade. Because that heat pump just needed a 30 amp and a 15 amp dual breaker, no additional breakers were needed. That was able to fit within the existing panel, and they were able to avoid an upgrade. Because it was a cold climate heat pump, there was no auxiliary strip heat needed, which would have required additional breaker spaces and may have necessitated a panel upgrade. And if space, just physical space in the panel is a concern, there are some heat pump systems where the air handler inside is powered by the outdoor unit, so you can reduce the number of breakers that way as well. Of course, there will be those cases where a panel upgrade is needed, but it doesn't have to mean that a heat pump's not an option. There's a new 30% tax credit worth up to $600 for a new electric panel. And then there's what's called the HERA rebates, which include up to $4,000 towards a new electric panel.
One last question, and I deal with clients in their homes all the time, and they're wondering, well, what's cheapest? So will heat pumps be more cost-effective to operate compared to other options?
Besides comfort, a lot of persistent misconceptions about heat pumps relate to the cost of relying on them versus gas, propane, or oil heat. It's true that 20 or 30 years ago, when the efficiency of those systems were significantly lower than today, they were much more expensive to operate. Today you can find very high efficiency heat pumps. We're talking about an HSPF, the heating efficiency over 12, and a SEER over 26, compared to historically an HSPF around 7 and a SEER around 10. And the COP numbers that you showed earlier help to tell that story as well about how efficient they are. At today's gas, propane, and oil prices, these high-performance heat pumps are going to be much easier on your wallet. Note that these are national averages that you're seeing in the table here. Local prices for electricity and various fuels will vary, but the equipment choices are the same nationwide.